Are you in love with someone or yourself? Vertical bar. Decoding the Anima and Animus. Have you ever wondered why certain truths about men and women are hidden, ignored, or even labeled as offensive? Why, despite the clear distinctions of history, psychology, and real-life experience, does modern society insist that men and women are fundamentally the same, not only in their values, but also in their natures, motivations, and desires? Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, disagreed. He believed that deep primal forces had their roots millions of years ago behind the collective mask, social roles, and polite expectations. These forces, which he called prototypes, shape the way men and women look at each other, desire each other, and often fail to understand each other. One of the most important, but also the most misunderstood archetypes is anima, the feminine image that lives inside the male mind. Carl Jung said, "Men do not love a woman literally, they love an image, a projection from within their unconscious, created by dreams, childhood stories, vague memories, and cultural symbols. And that image, none other than, is the anima." Similarly, women carry within them animus, the masculine image in the female psyche. But let's talk about the anima first. Carl Jung's affirmation, when men fall in love, they are mostly in love with their own image inside, not the real woman in front of them. That is why so many relationships end in disappointment, frustration, and feelings of being cheated. Not because the other person changes, but because the illusion is broken. The picture that men build, then hang on the woman they love, one day collapses, and they are in pain because of themselves. This is not a mistake. It is a natural psychological mechanism. But Carl Jung warned that modern society encourages this confusion. Fairy tales, movies, romance novels, all foster the fantasy that love is perfection, magical compatibility, finding the other half. But in reality, people do not love other people. They love themselves in the image of another. And when that image fades, so does the feeling. The most devastating thing Carl Jung ever said was, "We do not love other people. We love the image of ourselves reflected in them." No one wants to hear this, because it says that true love, if it exists, does not come from chasing after another, but from courageously facing the forgotten unconscious part of yourself. You have to meet your anima, understand it, and integrate it. Only then can you truly see the other person as they are. Carl Jung does not demean women. On the contrary, he celebrates femininity as a profound spiritual force, connected to nature, to the moon, to the body, to the mysteries of intuition and emotion. But he also warns, when men see women only through the lens of the anima, as muse, savior, perfect symbol, they inadvertently deprive them of their true humanity. And worse, they are trapped in an immature psychological state. A child looking for a mother, not a man wanting to love a real woman. What about the woman? She is not exempt from this cycle either. Women project their image onto men. Animus, the hero, the guide, the symbol of wisdom, strength, reason, and security. She may be deeply attracted to a man not because of who he is, but because he bears the face of an archetype that lives in her unconscious. And then, like men, when she discovers that he is just a man, flawed, frail, and emotionally confused, she feels disappointed, she feels betrayed. But in truth, it was she who had set the wrong expectations. Carl Jung does not say that the anima or animus is wrong. On the contrary, he sees them as natural, vital parts of the human psyche. But when left unconscious, unacknowledged, they cause the love tragedies that most of us experience. He calls the moment when the illusion is shattered, when the illumination is withdrawn, the first step of psychological maturity. Painful, but necessary. Because only when we see the other person not as an idol, but as a full human being, does true love have a chance to begin. But how many people dare to go through that door? Most people choose to go back to the cycle. Love, disappointment, resentment, and blame. Then love a new image, and the cycle repeats. Do you recognize yourself in this story? Stop and ask yourself, have I ever loved a real person, or have I just loved an image in my head? And if the answer makes you shudder, then congratulations, you have just set foot on the journey of inner growth. If the first part was a gentle wake-up call, then this sequel is the door to the real labyrinth, where anima and animus are not just theories, but powerful engines that control behavior, desires, and even the tragedy of emotional life. Carl Jung not only does he describes the anima as a feminine image that lives in the soul of man, but he also divides it into 4 levels, from the most basic instinct to the deepest spiritual soul. The anima can be a nurturing mother figure, a seductive lover, an inspiring muse, or a symbol of spiritual wisdom. Depending on the level of inner development, a man will be dominated by a certain level. But the most important thing is, if he does not know it, he will confuse all these levels with the woman he loves. For example, a man dominated by the lower level of his anima will be attracted to looks, strong emotions, or nurturing things that make him feel nurtured. He doesn't love the woman, he loves the feeling of returning to his mother. Conversely, a man dominated by the higher level of his anima may idolize his lover as a spiritual icon, someone who gives meaning to his life. But both are projections. And then, when the woman no longer meets those expectations, the love falls apart. Not because the other person has changed, but because the anima's mask has fallen off. So what about animus? The animus is the female equivalent of the mind. But unlike the anima, which is often associated with emotions, intuition, and imagery, the animus is the image of reason, logic, strength, and guidance. In a woman's dreams, the animus may appear as a heroic man, a warrior, a scholar, or a prophet. But in real life, when a woman is dominated by the unconscious animus, she tends to idealize a man as the one who will save her, to rescue her from emotional chaos and bring order. And if the man fails to do so, she is disappointed, then angry, then turns to self-reproach or to love. Carl Jung says clearly, we love not because of who someone is, but because of what they trigger in us. Oh, it may sound cruel, but this is the first step to psychological freedom. When we understand that what we feel, desire, and despair about in love is not about the other person at all, but about our psychology, we can begin to see the relationship. Yet, most of us are not taught that. We are raised on fairy tales, movies, and moral lessons about love as a journey to find our other half. No one tells us that the other half you are looking for may be the part of yourself you have refused to see. That's where shadow comes in. Shadow, according to Carl Jung, is the rejected, repressed part of the mind. Negative emotions, fears, and desires that are considered bad all get pushed into the unconscious. And when we don't face them, we start projecting them onto others. A man who doesn't admit his weakness will hate other men who show weakness. A woman who craves power but is taught to be gentle will either be attracted to or hate controlling men. And then love, instead of connection, becomes a battlefield. The man clings to the woman for emotional salvation. The woman clings to the man for mental stability. But both are searching for parts of themselves outside. As a relationship deepens, the projection begins to collapse. The man realizes she is not the perfect muse. The woman realizes he is not the invincible hero. And this is where the pain begins, but also where real growth begins. If both are brave enough to pull back the projection, see the other as a whole person, and face their shortcomings, that is when true love begins. But one thing needs to be understood. True love is not what we think. It's not about perfect connection. It's not about wordless understanding. It's not about salvation. It's about acceptance. It's about seeing both the light and the dark in the other person, and in yourself, and still choosing to stay, still choosing to continue listening, sharing, and growing. Carl Jung calls that journey individuation, the long and arduous process of becoming yourself. You no longer love to be saved, but to share the journey. No longer love for lack, but for completeness. No longer looking for the other half, but looking for someone complete enough to accompany you. And this leads to a scary truth. Very few people are willing to love that way. Because to love like that, you have to be willing to face the truth about yourself, about your false expectations, your beautiful illusions, and the forgotten parts of your soul. You have to lose the comfort of projection and replace it with truth, presence, and courage. Have you ever been there? Ever loved someone so much that when they no longer fit into your head, you can't stand it? Ever watched someone disappoint you? Not because they were bad, but because they no longer fit your dream. If so, remember, you're not alone. That's the beginning of truly loving and truly growing up. By now, you may be starting to feel that the relationships we commonly call love are more unconscious than we realize. Love, as Carl Jung described it, is rarely a conscious decision, but an unconscious response triggered by archetypal images that have been living in our minds long before we first met our first lover. And because of that, most relationships in modern times do not arise from a deep connection between two souls, but from the interaction between two imaginary sets. Men approach women with the image of the anima, the muse, the savior, the ideal of tenderness and intuition that he has rejected. Women approach men with the image of the animus, the guide, the strong hero, the one who can give her the stability she lacks. And when these images are shattered, as they inevitably are, both parties feel betrayed. But betrayed by whom? Not by the other person, but by yourself, an illusion in us. Carl Jung does not point this out to discourage us. On the contrary, he wants to be alert, because only by seeing the mechanisms that lie beneath the surface of our intense emotions can we end the dangerous loop. Attraction, projection, idealization, disillusionment, blame, hurt, and start again with someone else. But the same old pattern. That loop doesn't end until you turn inside. What Carl Jung called individuation is not about becoming a materially independent individual, but about coming back to yourself. It requires you to face your shadow self, the parts that have been denied, the emotions that have been repressed, the needs that you have placed on others to satisfy. True love comes not from finding the right person, but from being the right person. So, how do you break the cycle of illumination? The first step, according to Carl Jung, is awareness. You must learn to observe yourself. When you find yourself intensely attracted, stop and ask, am I in love with this person, or am I in love with a lost part of myself that I see in them? When you find yourself angry, frustrated, feeling betrayed, ask, am I angry because the other person is actually wrong, or because they no longer live up to my ideal image? The second step, withdraw the illumination. A difficult task, but extremely important. You have to withdraw the archetype from the other person. You have to see them not as your other half, but as a separate person, with their own wounds, mistakes, and shadows, just like you. Only then can love grow not based on expectation, but on real presence. The third step is prototype integration. That is, instead of looking for the anima or animus outside yourself, you must start cultivating it from within. Men need to learn to connect with their emotions, tenderness, intuition, and receptivity, instead of expecting it from women. Women need to develop their reason, purpose, direction, and inner strength, instead of looking to men for permanent security. When that happens, two people come together not because of need, but because of fullness. Carl Jung said, "Love is not about completing you, but about awakening." When a relationship leaves you feeling hurt, insecure, and confused, it may not be a sign of failure, but a sign that you are being called to mature. Because true love is uncomfortable. It will force you to take off your masks. It will ask you to let go of your naive dreams, and instead, dare to be real. It will make you vulnerable, because it will touch the deepest parts of you that you have denied. And when you get past all that, you will see something magical. You no longer see the other person as a means to an end, but as a soulmate. Not to complete you, but to accompany you on a long, dark journey, where you both learn to integrate, learn to forgive, learn to listen to the truth. It's not a fairy tale, it's an awakening love story. Carl Jung never promised that psychological understanding would bring comfort. On the contrary, he admitted that the path of self-awareness is a lonely, painful one, but the only path that leads to freedom of mind. In the modern world, where love is commercialized, idealized, and turned into an addictive tool, Carl Jung's insight comes as a wake-up call. It says, most emotional pain comes not from other people, but from our illusions about them. And when the illusion collapses, the truth emerges. The truth is that men and women are not clones of each other. We carry different wounds, different symbols, and different missions. When we don't understand that, we clash. But when we understand, when we see differences as a gift, not a threat, we begin to truly love. Carl Jung does not call for gender dissolution. He does not say that men and women are the same. He says, be awake to the differences and love each other from there. Are you ready? Not to find a perfect relationship, but to embark on a journey where you don't look for someone to save you, but meet someone to share the journey to save yourself. It is a love not for dreaming, but for transforming. And in a world full of illusions, that is perhaps the rarest miracle of all.